Ethan Sterling, take it. A new life or back to this. He gestures dismissively at her surroundings. The choice is simple. Have my baby. Clara Hayes. And if I say yes, what then? What becomes of me? Of the child? Ethan Sterling. You'll be compensated beyond your wildest dreams. As for the child, that will be my concern. This is a transaction, Ms. Hayes. Nothing more. A choice that could rewrite her entire existence. What would you do in Clara's shoes? Let us know your first thoughts in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss how this impossible bargain unfolds. Behind the steely facade of a financial empire lay a heart hardened by ruin. Could an unexpected encounter melt that icy exterior, or would it only carve deeper scars? Ethan Sterling, at 42, commanded a world built of sharp angles and calculated risks. His office perched candidatos the city like an eagle's nest, mirrored the man himself, impeccably organized minimalist, and radiating an unyielding power. Money, status, influence. He possessed them all. Yet in the silent hours when the city's hum softened to a whisper, a different kind of ledger revealed a profound deficit. 2 marriages, both spectacular failures, had taught him a bitter lesson. Love was a volatile currency, best left untraded. The first had ended in a brutal betrayal, a lesson learned in the cold language of misappropriated funds and shattered trust. The second, an alliance with a family issue prestigious lineage, had crumbled under the weight of their expectations and his own inability to thaw the inherited frost around his heart. Now Ethan sought an heir, not a relationship. A legacy, not an entanglement. He viewed it as another project, one requiring meticulous planning and absolute control. His long-standing assistant, Jessica Stone, a woman eventos, sharp intellect, and even sharper discretion, was tasked with exploring unconventional avenues. She was the one person who glimpsed the man behind the monolith, noting the almost obsessive way he arranged his desk, every pen, every file, a perfect, unbreachable line. A silent testament to a life spent warding off chaos. Miles away in a city that glittered umbilic for men like Ethan Sterling, Clara Hayes, perhaps 29, perhaps 30, measured her existence in a different currency survival. A cruel deception in a small art venture. A dream she'd poured her soul and every last penny into had unraveled her life, leaving her adrift on the unforgiving streets. Her world now was the chill of concrete, the gnawing ache of hunger, and the crushing weight of invisibility. Yet even amidst the grime, a spark of defiance flickered. She clutched a worn, almost comically short pencil stub, a relic of her late mother, a reminder of brighter days and whispered dreams of art. She'd sketch on discarded scraps of paper, fleeting moments of beauty captured with a hand that, despite its calluses, still moved with an artist's grace. One crisp afternoon, Ethan, eschewing his driver for a rare, solitary drive, found his mind wrestling with the logistics of his heir project. The city blurred in Avatsi his peripheral vision until a splash of incongruity snagged his attention. There, huddled on a grimy street corner, a young woman was lost in the act of drawing her brow, furrowed in concentration, oblivious to the indifferent stream of pedestrians. Annoyance pricked at him. Such a public display of what vulnerability wasted time. Yet something in the focused intensity of her posture, the way her messy brown hair fell across her face, held his gaze. He almost drove on, but the image lingered. Against his better judgment, he circled the block. Pulling his sleek, dark sedan to the curb, he lowered the window, his voice cutting through the street noise, direct and devoid of warmth. "You, over there." Clara started, her head snapping up. Suspicion clouded her tired blue eyes as she took in the expensive car, the impeccably dressed man. She hesitated, a wounded animal, wary of an unfamiliar presence. Ethan's patience, a notoriously scarce commodity, thinned. "I'm not asking for a tour of your outdoor studio. Come here." Slowly, reluctantly, Clara rose and approached the car. The closer she came, the more evident her hardship. The threadbare coat, the smudges of dirt on her cheek, the hollowness beneath her eyes. Yet there was an unbroken line in her spine, a flicker of defiance in her gaze. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice low but steady. Ethan studied her for a beat, his mind, ever the strategist, already calculating. "Get in. We need to talk." A dry, humorless laugh escaped her. "I don't think I'm the kind of talk you're looking for, mister." A frown creased Ethan's brow. "Don't be absurd. I have a proposition. A business arrangement." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "It could change your life." Clara's eyes narrowed. "What kind of business?" He looked at her sketch pad, then back at her. "Your artwork isn't bad." He conceded a rare, almost imperceptible softening of his tone. "At least you have a skill, besides loitering." Clara's chin lifted. "And you, sir, what skills do you possess, besides making offensive propositions from luxury vehicles?" A ghost of a smile played on Ethan's lips, so fleeting it might have been imagined. He found her spirit unexpectedly intriguing. "I want you to carry a child for me." "My child." The words hung in the air, heavy and unbelievable. Clara stared, her mind reeling. This had to be some cruel, elaborate joke. But the unwavering intensity in Ethan Sterling's eyes told her otherwise. This man, a stranger, cocooned in wealth and power, was deadly serious. He explained it then with the detached precision of a CEO outlining a merger. Full financial support, a new life, an escape from the crushing weight of her current existence. In return, a child, his heir. A clean transaction. The silence stretched. Clara's world, already teetering, tilted precariously. The offer was a lifeline, a monstrous, terrifying lifeline. The biting wind of the approaching evening whipped around her, a stark reminder of the night ahead. She clutched the small worn pencil in her pocket, its familiar shape, a small anchor in a sea of uncertainty. The man in the car watched her, his expression unreadable, waiting. For Clara Hayes, standing at the desolate crossroads of desperation and an unthinkable choice, the city's indifferent hum faded. All that remained was the echo of his proposition and the crushing weight of her own impossible decision. When a signature seals a fateful pact, is it the end of freedom or the beginning of an unforeseen bond? And can kindness truly blossom on the barren ground of calculation? The next morning, the city air felt different to Clara Hayes. Still sharp, still indifferent, but now laced with a terrifying, almost surreal thread of possibility. The worn pencil stub in her pocket felt both a comfort and a condemnation. She found Ethan Sterling's office building a steel and glass behemoth that seemed to pierce the very sky, its opulence a stark contrast to the grimy alley she had called home. Ethan's office was, as she might have imagined, vast, minimalist, with a view that encompassed the entire city like a conquered map. He was already there, a formidable presence behind a desk larger than her entire former living space. Jessica Stone, his assistant, greeted Clara with a polite, almost unnervingly calm professionalism. Clara, summoning a strength she didn't know she possessed, laid out her terms before signing anything. "I'll do this," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "But there are conditions. I expect full medical care, of course. And I need to be treated with respect, Mr. Sterling. Not just as a vessel." She hesitated, then added, "And if possible, I'd like to continue drawing." It's important to me. Ethan raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. He hadn't anticipated conditions, especially not from someone in her position. But there was that flicker of spirit again, the one that had, against all logic, intrigued him. He gave a curt nod. The medical care is a given, naturally. Respect is a reasonable expectation in any professional arrangement. As for your hobby, he waved a dismissive hand. As long as it doesn't interfere with the primary objective, I have no objection. The contract itself was a formidable document, thick with clauses and subclauses, each word a cold, legalistic chain. Clara read through it, her heart a leaden weight in her chest. Jessica Stone witnessed the signing, her expression carefully neutral, though Clara thought she saw a fleeting shadow of something, sympathy-pity, in the assistant's eyes before it vanished. Clara was moved into a modern, well-appointed apartment, not Ethan's main residence, but a property he owned, clearly chosen for its privacy and security. It was luxurious, sterile, and achingly lonely. Meals appeared as if by magic doctors, visited clinico-scheduled, and her material needs were met with an impersonal efficiency. Ethan himself remained a distant figure, his presence felt only through Jessica's updates or the occasional terse email outlining the next medical appointment. Jessica, during one of her check-in visits, showed Clara how to operate the apartment's advanced smart home features. This controls the blinds. This adjusts the lighting. She explained, her tone even. Then, with a small, almost conspiratorial smile, she added, Mr. Sterling appreciates automation in all aspects. Sometimes I think he wishes emotions came with a remote control. Clara offered a faint smile in return. Jessica's rare moments of dry wit were small, unexpected islands in an ocean of formality. Days bled into weeks. Clara fought against the encroaching despair by sketching. She drew the view from her window, the play of light on the expensive, unfamiliar furniture, the ghostly outline of her own reflection. It was a way to reclaim a small piece of herself, to assert her existence beyond the confines of the project. Ethan, meanwhile, kept his distance, burying himself in work. Yet sometimes, late at night in his own silent mansion, he'd find himself looking at the digital copies of Clara's initial sketches, the ones from the street corner, the ones Jessica had discreetly acquired. There was a raw talent there, an unrefined honesty that pricked at something dormant within him. He'd quickly dismissed the thought. She was a means to an end. Nothing more. One afternoon, Ethan made an unscheduled visit to the apartment, ostensibly to review some medical reports Jessica had left for his signature. Clara was attempting to eat a meticulously prepared kale-heavy salad that tasted like virtuous punishment. "Is your health satisfactory?" Ethan inquired, his voice formal, his eyes scanning the room as if assessing its adherence to his standards. "The medical reports are adequate." Clara put down her fork. "Yes, Mr. Sterling. Your project portfolio is progressing as expected," she replied, a hint of dry irony flavoring her tone. Ethan's jaw tightened infinitesimally. He wasn't accustomed to even a whisper of insubordination. The carefully constructed walls of Ethan's detached arrangement, however, were about to face their first tremor from an unexpected quarter. His older brother, Richard Sterling, a man who considered himself the stern guardian of the Sterling family's centuries-old reputation, had caught wind of Ethan's unconventional plan. Richard was everything Ethan was not, overtly traditional, judgmental, and deeply concerned with societal perceptions. Richard cornered Ethan in his office one afternoon, his voice a low growl of disapproval. "An heir is one thing, Ethan, but this method, a woman plucked from the streets, have you considered the implications, the potential scandal, the quality of the lineage?" Ethan's face was a mask of cold fury. My decisions regarding my legacy are my own, Richard. I don't recall inviting your consultation. This isn't just about you, Ethan. It's about the Sterling name, Richard retorted, his face flushed. You're playing with fire. This woman, whoever she is, she's a nobody, a liability. The argument was brief, brutal and unresolved, leaving a bitter taste in Ethan's mouth. He prided himself on control, but Richard, with his antiquated notions and overbearing interference, always managed to ignite a rare, unsettling anger within him. Later that week, Clara had her first ultrasound. The sterile white room, the hum of the machine, the cool gel on her skin, it all felt clinical detached. Then the doctor's voice, gentle but firm. Well, Miss Hayes, it seems we have a heartbeat. A tiny, flickering image appeared on the screen. A life. Her life. An involuntary gasp escaped Clara. Tears pricked at her eyes, unexpected and overwhelming. That evening, feeling a strange mix of elation and profound loneliness, Clara overheard Ethan on the phone. His voice was sharp, laced with an irritation she recognized from his brief, impersonal interactions. He was clearly speaking to Richard. It's just a surrogate, Richard. Nothing more, nothing less. Ethan snapped into the receiver. Everything is under control. There will be no complications, I assure you. Clara froze his words, striking her like a physical blow. Just a surrogate. Nothing more, nothing less. The fragile, nascent hope that had begun to flutter within her after seeing that tiny heartbeat on the screen crumpled into dust. She was a vessel, a means to an end. And Mr. Ethan Sterling, for all his wealth and power, was perhaps more imprisoned by his own calculations than she was by her circumstances. The sterile luxury of her apartment suddenly felt like the coldest, most desolate street corner she had ever known. Two heartbeats within one body. Could their rhythm be strong enough to shatter walls of prejudice and awaken emotions long thought dead? The words "just a surrogate" echoed in Clara's mind. For days, a cold counterpoint to the miracle blossoming within her. She threw herself into her art with a quiet fury, sketching not just the opulent confines of her new life, but the faces she remembered from the streets, their stories etched in lines of sorrow and resilience. It was her silent rebellion, her way of holding on to her own narrative. Then came the next scheduled ultrasound. Ethan, to Clara's surprise, announced he would attend. She suspected Richard's overbearing influence was at play, Ethan likely wanting to maintain an image of control over his investment. Jessica Stone accompanied them, her presence a small, steady comfort. The examination room felt tense. Ethan stood stiffly, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. As the doctor moved the transducer, two distinct, rapid-fire heartbeats filled the room. The doctor smiled broadly. Well, Mr. Sterling, Miss Hayes, it appears we have a surprise. Not one, but two. You're expecting twins. Clara's breath hitched. Twins. A wave of emotions, shock, a dizzying joy, and a redoubled fear washed over her. Instinctively, her hands went to her abdomen. Two tiny lives. Her children. Ethan was visibly stunned. He uncrossed his arms, leaning slightly forward, his gaze fixed on the two flickering shapes on the monitor. Twins, he repeated, his voice, barely a whisper, stripped of its usual authority. The doctor, clearly enjoying the moment, chuckled. Indeed. It seems your investment, Mr. Sterling, has yielded a double return. Ethan shot him a glare that could freeze fire, but the doctor, unfazed, continued. Both appear healthy and are developing well. Clara had to bite back a smile at the physician's audacity. The news of twins rippled through Ethan's meticulously ordered world. He found himself uncharacteristically disoriented. He'd planned for one heir, a straightforward continuation of his lineage. Two threw all his calculations into a spin. He began almost unconsciously to show a different kind of interest in Clara's well-being. He requested she be moved from the separate apartment into a secluded, more comfortable suite within his own mansion. For ease of medical monitoring, he'd stated curtly to Jessica, though even he wasn't entirely convinced by his own rationale. He started leaving books on prenatal care and nutrition for twins in her suite, anonymously, of course. Jessica, noticing his awkward attempts, once found him in his private library, frowning at a shelf laden with parenting guides. That one, Fatherhood for Dummies, seems to be a popular choice. Mr. Sterling, Jessica offered, her voice impeccably neutral, though a glint of amusement danced in her eyes. Ethan nearly dropped the book he was holding, something titled Zen and the Art of Diaper Changing. I am merely acquainting myself with market literature, Jessica, he mumbled, hastily replacing it. To understand the target demographic. Clara, meanwhile, found solace in her art and the growing connection to the lives within her. But the outside world, in the form of Richard Sterling, refused to remain at bay. Hearing of the twins, Richard's concern morphed into outright alarm. 2 potential heirs from questionable stock was in his mind, a looming catastrophe for the Sterling name. He arranged to accidentally encounter Clara in one of the mansion's sprawling gardens. His demeanor was smooth, almost fatherly, but his words were laced with a subtle venom. "My dear Miss Hayes," Richard began, admiring a rose, 2 little ones. "What a prolific development. Ethan, of course, will ensure you are handsomely compensated for your trouble. Perhaps even more so now. A clean break after the children are born would be in everyone's best interest, don't you think? To protect their future and yours." Clara felt a chill despite the afternoon sun. "Mr. Sterling," she replied, her voice quiet but firm, "these are my children I am carrying. Their well-being is my only concern, not compensation." Richard's smile thinned. "A commendable sentiment. But sentiment, my dear, rarely aligns with practical realities, especially in our world." The encounter left Clara shaken but resolute. These were her babies, and no amount of veiled threats or societal pressure would change that. One evening, unable to sleep, Clara wandered onto the balcony of her suite, the city lights a distant, indifferent glitter. Ethan, also restless, found her there. An awkward silence hung between them. I didn't realize someone of your stature ever found themselves lonely," Clara said, breaking the silence more to herself than to him. Ethan leaned against the railing, not looking at her. "Loneliness, Miss Hayes, doesn't discriminate based on bank balances. Sometimes it prefers more luxurious accommodations." He paused. "The pressure of this enterprise of ensuring everything is optimal, it can be isolating." It was the closest he'd ever come to admitting a personal vulnerability to her. Clara sensed a crack in his armor. "Sometimes," she said softly, "the things we can't control are the things that teach us the most." His head turned slightly. He didn't reply, but he didn't walk away either. They stood there for a while longer, 2 solitary figures under a vast starlit sky, an unspoken, fragile truce forming in the quiet of the night. The following week, the accumulated stress, Richard's insinuations, the weight of her situation, the sheer physical demands of a twin pregnancy, took its toll. Clara felt a sharp, cramping pain, followed by a wave of dizziness. Panic seized her. She called for Jessica, her voice trembling. Jessica found Ethan in his study, immersed in financial reports. When she relayed Clara's distress, the change in him was instantaneous. The cool, calculating CEO vanished, replaced by a man Kuyo face was etched with raw, undeniable alarm. "What happened? Is she all right? Get the car ready." Now he barked, already moving his usual composure shattered. At the hospital, waiting for the doctor's assessment, Ethan paced the corridor like a caged lion. The efficient, detached millionaire was gone. In his place, was a man consumed by a visceral fear he couldn't name, couldn't control. When the doctor finally emerged, announcing that Clara and the babies were stable, but needed complete bed rest and careful monitoring, Ethan felt a wave of relief, so profound it almost buckled his knees. He stood by Clara's bedside, watching her pale, sleeping face. The contractual obligation, the heir project, Richard's incessant warnings, all of it faded into insignificance. In that moment, looking at the woman carrying his twin children, Ethan Sterling confronted a terrifying, exhilarating truth. This was no longer just a transaction. The stakes were infinitely higher than he had ever calculated, and the thought of losing them was an abyss he wasn't prepared to face. When new life cries out, will old covenants still hold? And can a heart faced with undeniable truth dare to choose love over logic? The weeks leading up to Clara's due date were a blur of anxious anticipation for Ethan and quiet, resilient preparation for Clara. The bed rest had been a strange kind of limbo, a luxurious confinement where she was tended to meticulously, yet her mind often drifted to the streets she'd left behind, to the raw, unfiltered reality of her former life. Ethan, true to his word, ensured she had everything she needed, his visits becoming slightly more frequent, less overtly clinical. He'd sometimes find her sketching her brow furrowed in concentration, and would linger for a moment, a silent observer, before retreating back into his world of numbers and negotiations. Then, a little earlier than predicted, the day arrived. It began not with a dramatic rush, but with a quiet, persistent ache that Clara recognized instantly. She alerted Jessica, who, with an efficiency that belied the tremor in her own voice, informed Ethan. Ethan Sterling, a man who navigated billion-dollar deals with icy composure, found himself utterly undone by the simple words, "She's in labor." His meticulously planned schedule for delivery day vaporized. He was at Clara's side in minutes, his face a mask of controlled panic. The journey to the hospital was a surreal experience. Clara, breathing through the mounting contractions, found a strange strength in Ethan's uncharacteristic disarray. He in turn was awed by her quiet fortitude. He held her hand, his grip surprisingly tight, his knuckles white. In the delivery room, the sterile medical environment felt charged with an almost unbearable intensity. Ethan, refusing to be relegated to a waiting room, stayed by Clara's side. He witnessed her every wince, every strained cry, every surge of incredible effort. The raw primal power of childbirth stripped away every layer of his carefully constructed detachment. He saw not the surrogate of his contract, but Clara, a woman of astonishing strength, bringing his children into the world. The first cry, small yet piercing, sliced through the tense air. "It's a boy," the doctor announced, a beaming smile on his face. A wave of emotion, so potent it nearly floored him, washed over Ethan. He saw the tiny, perfect infant being gently cleaned, and his world tilted on its axis. Before he could fully process the miracle, another cry joined the first, a little softer, but just as insistent. And a girl, the doctor declared, a beautiful, healthy pair. The nurse, after a moment, carefully placed the swaddled newborns into Clara's waiting arms. Exhausted, her face luminous with sweat and an almost unbearable joy, Clara gazed at her son and daughter. Tears streamed down her face, tears of relief, of overwhelming love, and of a sorrow she knew was yet to come. Ethan watched, transfixed. He, the master of control, the architect of empires, felt utterly insignificant in the face of this elemental creation. The attending nurse, sensing the moment, gently nudged him forward. "Mr. Sterling, would you like to hold your son?" He moved as if in a dream. The nurse showed him how to support the tiny head, how to cradle the fragile body. As Ethan held his son for the first time, a warmth spread through his chest, an unfamiliar, terrifying yet profoundly beautiful sensation. He was clumsy, his large hands awkward around the small bundle. The baby, sensing perhaps the nervous energy, let out a small, protesting squawk. The nurse chuckled kindly. "He's not as fragile as a multi-million-dollar contract, sir. Just relax." Clara, despite her exhaustion, managed a weak smile at the nurse's unintended wit. Then Ethan held his daughter. She was even smaller, her tiny fingers curled into a fist. He looked from her to Clara, and in that moment, the carefully constructed walls around his heart didn't just crack. They crumbled. The days that followed in the hospital were a whirlwind of feeding schedules, diaper changes, which Ethan, under Jessica's surprisingly adept tutelage and Clara's amused guidance, tentatively attempted, and the overwhelming presence of 2 new lives. Jessica was a rock, efficiently managing visitors, mostly just Richard, who made a stiff, perfunctory appearance, his disapproval palpable, and ensuring Clara and Ethan had what they needed. She even managed to smuggle in some of Clara's favorite, less superfood snacks, earning a grateful smile from Clara and a raised eyebrow from Ethan, which Jessica met with an innocent, "just ensuring optimal morale, Mr. Sterling." But beneath the surface of this newfound chaotic domesticity, the shadow of the contract loomed. The date stipulated for Clara's departure was fast approaching. With a heavy heart once back in the sterile luxury of Ethan's mansion, Clara began to pack her few belongings. Each tiny onesie she folded for the twins, each soft blanket she smoothed, was a fresh stab of pain. She loved them with an intensity that frightened her. Ethan saw her preparations. He saw the unshed tears in her eyes as she hummed a lullaby to the sleeping infants. He saw the quiet dignity with which she was preparing to honor an agreement that now felt like a cruel mockery of everything sacred. His carefully constructed world, his plans, his very identity were unraveling. The Air Project had a face, 2 faces, and a mother whose quiet strength had inadvertently laid siege to his fortress of solitude. The day arrived. Clara's small suitcase stood by the door of her suite. She held her son, then her daughter, imprinting their scent, their warmth, onto her soul. Tears now flowed freely, unchecked. This was the price. Ethan found her there, a portrait of quiet heartbreak. He stood for a long moment, the silence thick with unspoken words. "Clara," he began, his voice hoarse. He had rehearsed this. He had clauses to invoke financial settlements to confirm. But the words died on his lips. Instead, he found himself speaking a different truth, one that clawed its way up from a place he'd long thought barren. "My marriages, they weren't just failures, Clara. They were lessons in fear. Fear of trust, fear of being seen, fear of this." He gestured vaguely, encompassing her, the babies, the raw emotion in the room. This contract, he picked up the document from his briefcase, its crisp legal paper suddenly feeling like ash in his hands, was born from that fear. It was an attempt to control something that should never be controlled. Clara watched him, her breath caught in her throat, not daring to hope. "It was my greatest miscalculation," Ethan continued, his voice gaining a desperate strength. And then, with a decisive, almost violent rip, he tore the contract in 2, then in 4, letting the pieces flutter to the expensive Persian rug. "I don't want you to go, Clara," he said, his eyes for the first time nakedly vulnerable. "I can't. I won't adhere to this. I need you, not as a surrogate, as Clara, the mother of our children. Our children need you." He took a hesitant step towards her. "And I think I need you 2 more than I ever thought possible." Clara stared at the torn paper, then at Ethan, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Ethan, how How can I believe this?" She whispered the words laced with a lifetime of caution. After everything, after all the planning, the detachment. Before Ethan could answer, a sharp, imperious voice cut through the charged atmosphere from the doorway. "Ethan, what is the meaning of this circus?" Richard Sterling stood there, his face a mask of cold fury, having arrived unexpectedly, perhaps tipped off by a concerned staff member or his own intrusive investigations. He surveyed the scene. Clara in tears, Ethan with an expression Richard had never witnessed on his brother, and the damning pieces of the torn contract scattered on the floor. "Are you actually dismantling a legally binding agreement for her?" Richard's voice dripped with contempt. "Have you lost your mind entirely? This will ruin everything, the Sterling name, your credibility." Ethan turned to face his brother, and for the first time in his life, Clara saw not a trace of fear or deference in his stance. She saw a lion protecting his pride. This Richard Ethan said, his voice low but resonant with unshakable conviction, gesturing towards Clara and the nearby cots where the twins slept, "is my family. And I will not allow you or anyone else to dictate its terms or destroy its foundations with your outdated prejudices." His gaze was unwavering. "You can either accept that, or you can see yourself out. Can love truly conquer the storms of the past and societal prejudice, building a genuine sanctuary from shattered pieces?" Richard Sterling's face was a thundercloud of disbelief and outrage. "Ethan, have you taken leave of your senses? Do you understand the scandal this will cause, tearing up a legal document for her?" He gestured dismissively towards Clara, who stood her ground, her chin held high despite the tremor in her hands. Ethan stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Clara, a protective gesture that spoke volumes. "Richard," he said, his voice calm, but edged with steel, "my senses have never been clearer. This is Clara Hayes, the mother of my children, and soon, if she'll have me, my wife. The only scandal I see is a family so mired in outdated notions of propriety that it would sacrifice genuine happiness for an illusion of respectability." Clara felt a surge of warmth at his words, at his unwavering defense. She found her own voice, then clear and steady. "Mr. Sterling," she addressed Richard, "your brother has offered me a love and a family I never thought I'd have. That is worth more than any Sterling fortune or societal approval." The confrontation was tense, but Ethan remained resolute. Richard, seeing the unshakable determination in his brother's eyes and the quiet strength in Clara's, eventually retreated, sputtering about dire consequences, though his threats lacked their earlier conviction. He was a man witnessing the dismantling of a world he understood, replaced by something he couldn't comprehend, or perhaps envied. The aftermath of Richard's departure left an odd quiet in the grand mansion. For Clara, Ethan's bold declaration and the tearing of the contract were monumental, but trust, once so thoroughly broken by circumstance and calculation, needed more than a grand gesture to be fully restored. She had agreed to stay, yes, but a part of her remained cautious, watching, waiting. Ethan understood. He knew words were cheap. Actions were the currency of true change, and so began his most important undertaking, not the acquisition of another company, but the patient, earnest wooing of Clara's heart and the meticulous construction of a true family. He proved to be a surprisingly dedicated, if initially clumsy, father. He learned to distinguish the "I'm hungry" cry from the "I need a change" cry. He mastered the art of swaddling eventually, after several attempts, that left the twins looking more like poorly wrapped burritos. One morning, Clara found him in the kitchen, a cookbook open, surrounded by a chaotic array of flour eggs, and what looked suspiciously like a burnt offering. "I was attempting," Pancakes, he announced, a smear of flour on his aristocratic nose, looking utterly defeated by a mixing bowl. Clara leaned against the doorframe, a genuine laugh bubbling up. Ethan Sterling, a titan of industry, felled by a simple pancake batter. I think she said, stepping in to rescue the situation, we should perhaps stick to takeout until you've completed a basic culinary boot camp. Ethan grinned, a rare, unguarded expression that made her heart skip a beat. Perhaps that's a more strategically sound investment for now. He didn't just focus on the children. He made a conscious effort to understand Clara, the woman, the artist. He listened, truly listened when she spoke of her dreams, her past disappointments, her love for art. He converted one of the sun-drenched rooms in the mansion into a beautiful art studio for her, stocking it with the finest supplies. Every artist needs their space, he'd said simply, but the gesture spoke volumes. He began to accompany her on walks in the sprawling gardens, not as the owner of the estate, but as a companion. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. He even, to Jessica Stone's utter astonishment, started leaving the office at a reasonable hour. A development she dryly noted was more shocking than the Sterling stock taking a nosedive, and infinitely more welcome. Their life wasn't a fairy tale devoid of challenges. There were sleepless nights with colicky babies, moments of frustration, and the lingering whispers from Ethan's social circle, which he deflected with a newfound indifference. Richard remained distant, though Jessica reported he occasionally inquired about the Sterling heirs with a grudging curiosity. But through it all, Ethan and Clara built their foundation, brick by patient brick. He learned the language of gentle reassurance. She learned to unfurl the protective layers around her heart. He discovered joy in the chaos of family life, a joy far more profound than the sterile satisfaction of a successful business deal. She found her artistic voice again, her canvases blooming with color and emotion. Several months later, on a warm spring afternoon, Ethan and Clara sat on a blanket in the garden, watching their twins Leo and Lily take wobbly, triumphant first steps on the soft grass. Laughter, pure and infectious, filled the air. Ethan turned to Clara, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled. I used to believe happiness was an asset to be acquired, a goal to be achieved through meticulous planning and control. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, watching their children. And I used to think hope was a luxury I couldn't afford. But look at us now. She gestured to their giggling toddlers. We're painting a rather beautiful picture together, aren't we? He took her hand, his touch warm and sure. The most beautiful one I could ever have imagined. He remembered his early, clumsy attempts at singing them lullabies, his deep baritone, more likely to startle than soothe, and Clara's gentle intervention, her voice, a soft melody that always did the trick. Those shared moments, the small, imperfect, everyday acts of love, were the true masterpieces. Their peace was not a passive state, but an active creation earned through courage, vulnerability, and the unwavering choice to put love first. As Leo tumbled, and Lily clapped her hands with delight, Ethan Sterling knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in his soul, that this chaotic, beautiful, unpredictable life, with Clara and their children, was the only empire worth building, the only legacy that truly mattered, and so from the unlikeliest of bargains, a true testament to love's enduring power was built. Ethan and Clara's journey, woven with threads of desperation, calculation, and ultimately profound connection, reminds us that sometimes the most beautiful gardens bloom from the most barren ground. Isn't it remarkable how often life's greatest treasures are found, not in the perfectly planned blueprints, but in the unexpected detours of the heart? Perhaps somewhere in the quiet corners of our own lives, similar stories of courage, healing, and improbable love are waiting to unfold. This story truly resonated with us, watching two souls navigate such complex beginnings to find their earned peace. What about you? What was the moment in Ethan and Clara's story that touched you the most? Or perhaps made you reflect on the nature of love and second chances? We'd be deeply moved to read your thoughts in the comments below. Your insights and feedback are incredibly valuable to us. If you have any ideas on how we can make our future stories even more compelling, or if there's anything in today's narrative you feel we could improve, please don't hesitate to share. Your voice helps us grow and bring you narratives that hopefully continue to inspire and connect. If Ethan and Clara's journey to find happiness touched your heart, we'd be so grateful if you'd give this video a like. And if you believe their story of transformation might bring a little hope or spark a meaningful conversation for someone else, please consider sharing it. Of course, to join us for more emotional journeys and explore the incredible resilience of the human spirit, do hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Together, let's continue to discover stories that remind us of the beauty and complexity of life. Thank you for being with us today, for sharing this experience. We look forward to seeing you in the next story.